Well, I haven't said anything about my Lotus Excel project since I revealed that that's what I had put into the overgrown garage that I am borrowing from one of my neighbours. And I haven't said what my intentions for the car are. Now, this is a car I bought for the specific purpose of doing an electric vehicle conversion. I've been wanting to do an electric Lotus since my electric vehicle racing days as a mechanic in the 90s, and I wanted to buy an Esprit, but Esprit prices had gone so high in recent years that I realised that the Lotus Excel would be a good choice, and I have been picking away at it. I haven't shot any film, and that's partly because whilst this garage has power, there is no lighting in here. There were lights, but they had rotted completely through, and I have not spent any money putting up any lights. I've just been using task lighting, and the Excel has to be positioned diagonally to gain access and takes up a lot of room. It's a long car. But what I have achieved picking away at it is I removed all the suspension, which that was a bit of a fight. There were bolts that took me 3 days to remove, because although these are a fiberglass car with a galvanized steel chassis, there are a lot of components that aren't galvanized, and even some of the galvanized components have suffered quite badly due to the fact that this car stood in someone's front garden since about 2006, until I bought it. So the suspension came off, the engine came out, the gearbox came out, and then yesterday the chassis came out. And I did this by slightly unconventional means that normally you take the body off the chassis, but instead I actually lowered it down out of the shell. I'm quite restricted on height in here, and this was just the plan that made sense to me. So I'll pull out the chassis and we'll have a look at the kind of state that's in. Okay, so this is what you'd ideally like to see on a galvanized chassis. The factory galvanizing in good condition, and generally speaking the front end of the chassis is pretty much all okay. Most of the galvanizing is still intact, though there are patches that have failed. Inside the suspension turrets are fairly poor in terms of the galvanizing. All the steel's absolutely fine. Obviously helped by a lack of complete oil tightness. However, once we get to the back, things are a little bit different, and the galvanizing has just completely crumbled away, and although the steel underneath still appears to be basically sound, this is a chassis that is going to need blasting and a new protective coating applied, probably an epoxy. So once I've got the rear suspension bridge removed, because at the moment these long bolts that also serve as the upper mounts for the rear dampers are not interested in moving from their home, and remove the differential, and I shall send this off to get blasted, and components that, well, I mean, you know, this was galvanized, but it's just, I may be looking for a new rear suspension bridge, which is fairly easy to find. The differential will need a rebuild. That's somewhat leaky. I mean, this is only a 40,000 mile car, but a lot of Lotuses, particularly when they got into the second-hand market, ended up doing very few miles a year, with long periods of neglect and lay-up in between, which does not do anything for the reliability, and not good for things like oil seals. Now the fiberglass shell itself is, generally speaking, in pretty good condition. A lot of lack appeal, but very little evidence of any osmosis to the fiberglass. Maybe the roof capping rails. The interior is very tired, so there's very little light in here, but you can see the grey windscreen is quite dirty as well, and the completely cracked and split vinyl. That's probably the worst of it. And the driver's seat, I need to find another one or have a repair done. But otherwise, the interior, while poor, is livable with. So the plan is to get the chassis fully refurbished, work on the electric conversion, and then to put it on the road as a rolling restoration for the trim and bodywork. Now, as far as the electric vehicle powertrain are concerned, we're looking at a Nissan Leaf motor with a custom gear casing on the back of it that takes the first reduction gears out of the original Leaf gearbox, driving the original prop shaft, or a modified prop, depending on how things actually work out, which will sit where the original gearbox was, and then the considerable amount of room in the engine bay and extended forward into the nose can be utilised for batteries and inverters and distribution boxes and so on. And the generous space left by the removal of the fuel tank will enable the fitting of a few modules in the back to keep the weight distribution 50-50. So that's what I'm planning to do with the Excel and where we are on the project right now.